Lindbergh Schools Board of Education Special Workshop number 1531 is now called to order. In order to follow the St. Louis County Department of Public Health 2019 novel coronavirus order for business and individual guidelines for social distancing and reopening, the number of patrons in attendance is limited this evening, but this meeting is also a live stream and can be viewed currently by the public on the district's YouTube channel. So 2.0, Dr. Lake, do we have any changes to the agenda?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Matt, second. Second by Mike. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. We'll move to then 4.0 discussion topics. We'll start with compass goals. So, Dr. Lake, take over this one.
Actually, we're going to do budget first, if that's okay.
Budget, okay,
Yep.
fine. So, we'll turn over to Joelle.
Why don't you, can you do it from the podium?
Can I do it?
Because you got this back here, that's why we put that there.
I'll scoot out of the way for you. Even.
I did invite Dawn to attend, so she's in the audience. Putting this whole project together can't be done without my team, and Dawn's a bigger player in that. The whole district is the team that puts the budget together, but, you know, putting the document in place is a lot of work from the business office, so it's good for her to see the end result. How much time do I have? I want to make sure I meet my marks so everybody gets their turn today. But the first few slides, you guys tell me? Okay. The first few slides just go over our normal process that everyone is pretty much used to hear about our workshop and when we adopt the budget, that we also take budget amendments on a monthly basis to the board so that we keep the budget current. And that's all. I do my thumbs up too.
Done.
All right, done. A main goal of the budget document is to ensure alignment with the compass goals, and that's why they're presented at the same time we talk about budget and in the budget workshop. So, budget development process, it really happens all year, but in February through April is when we work hard on it, with negotiations and then with the buildings, pretty much zero-based budgeting at this time, which is a transition from 3 years ago, and it's an intense process, and I'm really proud of our buildings and our directors who do all the work. Breakdown of funding sources. These are our major revenue sources, and we rely heavily on local revenue. I got to spend a little time with Megan prior to being a new board member and talk about how our operations work, but that's a familiar note in the budget each year. So here's just a little visual on our breakdown of revenue, and the big green is all of our taxes. So real estate, personal property, commercial, and everything else is a much smaller factor, and so everything we do really is reliant on that local revenue. This is just a summary of our year-to-date current process we're in the budget, where we are at with our revenue year-to-date as compared to previous fiscal years. I will tell you that COVID has had an impact on our revenue, on our local revenue. There's always collection rate is a big component. You can assess the taxes to the taxpayers, but how quickly you collect it is how quickly we get it in our bank account. And we know with COVID and the pandemic, there are people who are struggling, so our collection rate is down. This is another slide kind of indicating that process. It gives our collections year to date, our current budget, and what percent we are of collections, and again, it indicates that our revenue sources we're just collecting things a little bit slower pace than we had done in the past. The ones in red there, I highlighted, those are interest revenue on our budget. We know that's way down, and so you can kind of see our trend line from previous years. And then financial institution tax, the tax on banks, very unpredictable, and that's where we're at with that so far. The other area in our budget, I've listed the programs there. There are 6 different programs that we really call enterprise funds in governmental accounting, and they're programs that are set up really to break even. The state does limit how much money you can make on these programs. There's a profit max, because that's not what we're in business to do. But what you can do is make enough profit to reinvest in yourself for these programs, and also to cover equipment purchases. Like, we want our food service to break even, not just the revenue expense, but also to put some money in the bank. So if we need a new freezer, we can use those funds to pretty much cover their overhead. These programs have taken a hit in all of our profit and loss areas. I mean, it's not any different than any profit and loss company that you see on the street that are having the same problems due to COVID. So this is not a surprise, but I just wanted you to have noted those programs that they're not, bringing in the funds that we're used to.
So
Go back.
go back one. So let's just pause here for a second. So
Go back
if you
one.
look at that list, when we came in 3 years ago, we did put our fingers into everything, eyeballs onto everything. These enterprises, there's some on there that were not breaking even and actually costing the district money. So our goal, we were on track to get all of them to be at least breaking even or providing a little extra revenue towards the ongoing operations of the district. So we're continuing to do that. The print shop was one that we would have probably had in place this year that historically had not been running, had been running in the red and not the black. So just, that's another efficiency, another way that we can repurpose funds and dollars with this existing budget. So that was another one of our strategies. We're just not there because of COVID, obviously, because Flyers Club and ECE usually gives us a nice little going revenue stream, but they're at a loss this year because we're where we are.
Have class sizes and, there's not going to make as much money as they normally do.
Well, and our new food service folks, they didn't really get a chance. That was part of their new bid, is that they have to break even. They got to run it like a business. I mean, they can't be a drain on our operating budget. They have to run it, make a little profit.
We bring food service next month to the board for their annual, and they have done some great things. And one of those is on inventory, so they've already done it, but we know we can go further. And once we get through the pandemic. So again, not a surprise, but just want you to be aware. Okay, when we look at local revenue, we always have to have this slide, because what is CPI? CPI is what makes or breaks us as far as our new revenue for the next year, as far as local taxes. We talk about the Missouri Hancock Amendment, which is the calculation that limits how much a district can grow from one year to the next. There's 2 factors: how much you actually grow in assessed valuation, which is all of your commercial, your personal, and your real estate, and what the state says you can grow through CPI. So, next slide. I know this is small, but I really want to go back 10 years on it, because I think it's a good thing when you have the document in front of you to visit. This year's assessed valuation prediction from the county is about almost 7%. We'll get those final numbers in August, right at the time we set the levy in September, but you have to adopt the budget in June. So this year it's 6%, and the lower number is consumer price index, or the inflation rate given to us by the state, but we can only grow 1.4. So all the red numbers on here are the numbers we had to use in those budget years for growth. You can look back, you can easily see which ones are reassessment years and which ones are non-reassessment years. Because in 19 was a reassessment year, and we grew 17.58% in our assessed valuation, but the CPI was only 1.9. So this is a good side look at. So what does that mean when assessed valuation grows faster than the inflation rate? It means we have to roll back our levy to hold the taxpayers harmless on property that existed in both years. So if you look at this history here, you can see the last 2 reassessment years, we had to roll back our levy. In 16, our total levy was 445. And then from all the rollbacks to this current year, which is an estimated rollback, we're down, to 386. The debt service never has to roll back. We kind of calculate that one differently, because you have to levy what you need to pay your debt, and we look at that a little differently. But when you look at the history of it, there's always a losing, we're always losing on the side of local tax revenue. Dr. Lake, I don't know if you wanted to note anything on that. Go back one, Dominic.
No, just, I mean, if you look at what the tax rate was, I mean, we consistently had to roll back, and that's, that's something to take into consideration when you're a growing district like we are. You're adding employees, you're doing things like that. So we just, we wanted you to see a good visual what the tax rate was, 5 years ago and what it is today. And this next slide, I think, is very telling. And so when you look at operating levy, so Ladue obviously is the lowest, and then we're right there in the county. And so when we came in 3 years ago, we started having conversations. If you remember the story I told our community, and I told teachers, and I told all employees, is that we aren't even going to think about an operating levy until we know exactly how we're spending this budget, and can we get every ounce and every efficiency out of this current budget with that tax rate that keeps rolling back on us. And so we're not there yet, but people need to know that conversation is going to have to start occurring. And I think that's a very big visual. One of the things that we talked about was, when I came in 3 years ago, we were hemorrhaging our good teachers. They were leaving for other districts because of compensation. And so you as a board, the current board at that time, and myself, we talked about, well, where do you want to be? I just asked the question, where do you want the pay to be? And we talked 5 to 8. We never want to be probably in the top 5, but we need to be in that 8 range, 7. Competing with districts that people won't go, oh my gosh, I want to jump ship to Kirkwood because I can go make $12,000 more. So we've done that work over the last 3 years with our existing budget and our operating levy. So we're going to show you a next slide. You want to go ahead? Go to the next. Did you want to say anything to that before we go?
No, when we get to that, we'll get to the expenditures. We'll talk about expenditures.
All right, so then we'll talk about expenditures.
One time, just on the last column there, I wanted to go back one. The last column, it's the operating levy for the current year we're in, because of course we don't set our new one until next year on 9/1 next fiscal year. And then our assessed valuation data is the current data from St. Louis County. So that's in billions unless I note it millions. So like Ladue is 1.9 billion that they're drawing from on their assessed valuation. If you go down, you can just see that's what that number reflects. So, but it's sorted by low to high. Okay, we're getting into that. We always want to talk about reserve fund and why we have reserve fund, and this is like the perfect year to talk about why we have reserve fund. Pay for unexpected costs, cover revenue shortfalls. I mean, if you remember when we started the budget in June, ended in June from last year and started in July, the state had cut our revenue 50%. I know it's only 9% of our total revenue budget, but it's still $10 million, and when you only get 5, you worry. And have they done a really good job of pacing back to fully funding the formula by the end of June? Yes, they have. So I feel positive that they've met their promise, and we're going to get to that point. But when you start the school year and you don't know what you're going to get, this is what you need money in the bank. So this is a revenue and expense trend line, just again to indicate this is 3 years data, but the big indicator there is the revenue is the big peak because we only get 80% of our money in January, and then we have to live on it through the rest of the school year. The expenditures are pretty much a straight line as you look. I mean, it's curvy, but it's straight compared to revenue. And so that's what we do. November is the low month when, we're watching payrolls, and our payroll is about $3 million a month. And so we want to make sure that in November and December, before we get our big money from the county, and so that we have enough money in the bank. This is a reserve picture for the current and 2 operating years. There's a big spike in that in operations. 3 years. That's only the current year, I think. 3 years through current. It just shows our operating reserves. The big spike is because when we did our bond issue, we've got more money into there. So next one. And then this is capital. We have done in the capital, which is not bond issue funds, we have spent that down, but we can give you a piece of paper of how we spent that down. We've strategically spent down fund balance in our capital account to make improvements on the buildings that you know, we've talked a lot about deferred maintenance and things that weren't, maybe needed to be, you know, moved forward and keeping that up. And we have done that across the district in all of our schools, but done it strategically. We have that committee, that's facility advisory, that meets annually and really plans for the next year's projects, make sure everybody is touched. And so the spend down on this has really been a strategic spend down. A new thing that this is a new slide in my presentation that we talked, Dr. Lake and I, over the past couple of years about it. We talked about it when we're getting our bond rating, you know, and that's something that we're going to look to a different vendor this year on our bond rating exercise. But when we sell bonds, it's like we have to go get our credit report and we have to answer a lot of questions. And one of the big things in our credit report is they like to see you have fund balance policy. Why? You know, it's because you have a plan if there's an extreme event, COVID, pandemic, or some major things that happen. It's letting them know that you've talked about it and that you know, you're going to have a way to pay it back, but you're not going to have a time when you don't have enough money in savings to, you know, cover unexpected costs or poor economic conditions. So we really want to engage the board this coming school year. There's a lot of different ways to look at fund balance policy. Every district has a different one because it's unique to their culture and their demographics. But this is a story we'd like to start working with and have this maybe before we can go get our bond rating this year with Air Force. What the fund balance policy is, it's just a framework. Some districts have it very detailed. Some have it just as a large, broad framework. Those are things that we have not discussed. We want to do that with the board as a whole about what is the right fund balance for us. Many of them, and I will say GFOA, which is the Government Finance Association, their recommendations for fund balance policy is if you plan to spend down, then you should have a plan to pay back. You know, it's kind of like you want to buy a new car, so you put the money in the bank, you take it out, and now you got to put it back for the next new car. We want to do that same thing with our funds. We really have two big funds. We have the operating fund, which is for the day-to-day operations, and the capital, which we really need to. One, we just bought, you know, another property acquisition next door to our school, which is valuable. We want to have money in the bank for that type of situation. We want to have money in the bank for unexpected things, if a roof or a boiler goes down. And then we want to have some furniture comes out of there, things that we want to do in the buildings. So we're saying that if you spend it down strategically like we have, we also need a plan to build it back. And so those are the things that we want to talk about over the next year. Tony, do you have anything to say about that?
No, thank you.
I just put the reds in here to talk about it. You know, I just thought the reds were really good this year. Exposure to significant one-time outlays. You know, how many teachers did we hire one time only this year, Brian, that, you know, luckily with our ESSER funds that we're getting from the federal government, it's over $1 million that we're going to backfill that with a number of additional positions that we put in place this year to do the right thing for kids and safety first. And then at the bottom, the finance person, you know, the bond rating, your credit report. I check my own at least once a month, but I want the district's credit rating to be, you know, top notch, and this is going to help us in that area.
Joelle, real quick, so you mentioned ESSER funds. Is there a slide later
that? We'll definitely get more into the ESSER funds. Also, I mean, a good reason to have one of the bond rating too is because you also get a lower interest rate. It's just like your interest rate, credit report for yourself personally. The better rating you get, the lower interest you pay. And, you know, when you're borrowing big money, like we did this time with a $105 million bond issue, you know, we want the lowest rate possible. So, and this is just a little bit more about how fund balance works, fund balance policies work. And then I also put on here a financing bridge. I think that's a good terminology in this. One area we have, I didn't put it out to all of you yet, but the Dressel crosswalk is finally making a move to come into play. This was hoping it was going to happen this summer. We just found out that they approved it, but now it's going to happen in the fall. But that's, we may finance that with fund balance because it's a $250,000 purchase, and it's a bridge, and then we should pay it back. But those are the types of things we need for those expenditures. Okay, now we're getting into expenditures. Which just talks about the
Let's
different.
just pause for a second. Any questions about that conversation that we need to have around, getting a policy and guidelines around fund balance? I mean, we've been talking about it. We've kind of had a kind of an unwritten,
Yeah.
kind of what strategy we've been doing. We just need to formalize it because it will, one, help us, with our bond rating and interest rate and just all of those good things. And it's a good thing to have in place. Okay? Question? All right. So that is one of Joelle's.
Yes, it is one of my conference goals, so. Go for next. So this is our expenditure categories, the major categories, and I always take note that 70% is wages and benefits, so, which is recurring. We look at our capital and our capital money going down, we're usually spending that on one-time things. We bought additional property, that was a one-time purchase, it's not gonna hit every year. But wages and benefits are recurring, and they're almost 80% of our annual budget. So this is a slide just showing the current year, another slide just to indicate how much salaries, three graphs, the pair of orange and green is salaries and benefits. And the final one is all accounts. So when you look at purchase services and supplies, it's very, very small compared to the recurring payroll. This is a small slide, but when you get the, I'm going to let Dr. Lake talk about it, but when you get the packet in hand or look at it yourself on the board docs, it is our current pay scale, and this is really Brian really with too. The yellow indicates our pay scale going into next school year for teachers. And this, I wanted to put teachers on here because that's the salary schedule that is most known, and that's what we're here in business for. But really this, looking at pay scales and making sure there's competitive wages for all employees has been important. So it's been on teachers, on nurses, on secretarial staff. We use the same process for the last 3 years to look at them all compared to benchmarks. The tan towards the bottom is where we were at in 18-19. So when you look at the data, it'll show you exactly we're 10th. I can't see the numbers from here myself, but in the first column, we're like 10th across all St. Louis County districts right now, but then in 18-19, we were 20th. And so this shows you how far we've come in the last 3 years to do exactly what we promised to get those wages up. And that's reoccurring money, and so you want to give a raise every year, it doesn't go away, and so that's where you need to start thinking about how you generate that money when you're tied to a formula that really isn't effective local taxes.
So again, I mentioned it earlier, so we've talked about that 5 to 8 range, efficiencies within our current operating levy, our current budget, repurposing dollars. Again, an example would be we used to have 6 landscape guys. We only have 3 now because we saved $20,000 by outsourcing that. So we've been doing that. And again, we talked about telling that story of, hey, we're as fiscally responsible and efficient and looking at ways and constantly looking at the best way to spend taxpayer dollars to make sure we maximize it. We're not in that mindset of we've always spent it that way, so we always spend it that way. We're always constantly evaluating that best and next practice. And so when you look at this, Joelle and I thought, we need to start having this conversation. Again, it's not an immediate, oh my gosh, crisis mode, but again, you guys know I don't like to operate that way. I want to plan a story for 3 years. I want to talk about where we need to be thinking about going. And so when you look at where we landed, we're still not quite in that 5 to 8 range. So we're still outside of that a little bit. If we're going to probably make those kinds, the big jumps on our salary schedule in the last 3 years are probably not going to be doable. Raises, stepping down, adding some new money, giving them 3%, but we gave a 4%, and then the big cost was when we blew up our salary schedule because it was so bad. I mean, it's funny, Rich Flores and I were talking the other day, and he said, I remember the first time I met you, I asked you the question, what do you like about our teacher salary schedule? And your response was absolutely nothing because it handcuffed you. You weren't allowed to be flexible in it, and you weren't able to operate efficiently and do the things that we're trying to do. And so kind of gotten ourselves to this point. We're going to be able to continue going, but again, just if we want to make that initial, we're probably going to have to generate some more revenue somewhere. Don't know what that looks like yet, but just again, it's time for us to at least start thinking in those terms. Any questions around that? But it's great progress. I mean, you look at that and the fact that, you know, like I said, everybody kept coming in, you know, I know there's people saying, when we need an operating levy so we can pay our employees more. Well, no, we don't, not until we sit down, and Joelle and I knew exactly where every dollar is going, all $80-some million of it, and we're getting closer on that, and we still have some other efficiencies around transportation.
Never the efficiencies. I mean, I think that's an ongoing thing. But
Yeah.
over the last 3 years, I mean, that's including the budget we're adopting, hope to adopt for next year, it's a 1.3 million in just doing things a little bit differently, and not cutting costs, but shifting an expenditure from here. And I think tricky to that is when you look at our compass goals and you look at the complete section for everybody. In everybody's complete section, there's efficiencies that have been gained. That's like a marker of what we've done to make this happen and get them to that level. So you really just don't want to see that. I don't want to see the yellow go low again.
Yes.
So and to keep pace,
Yeah, and when you think about it, the reason we do those efficiencies, there's 3 reasons. One is professional learning for all employees, not just our teaching staff, and we've been doing more professional learning with our support staff, compensation, and then different kinds of student programs, they cost money, the NWEA is a new assessment program that we had money budgeted, but that's a little more robust kind of thing that we were able to. We talk about student growth, right? So we had to get an instrument that allows us to do that. But by being efficient with dollars, we're able to do that. And we'll talk. Terry can talk about, but Terry did an amazing job with her budget. She truly did a zero base. She started at 0 and built it this year. Yeah, so she will give her some props. So, and Beth does that as well. I mean, so here we are really in that. I'd say it's even more than the hybrid zero-based operating out of here. So I know there's a former board member that. Larry McIntosh was always about the zero-based. I think he would be happy to hear that. So there you go.
Yep, they are.
Any questions about that in the conversation? That's the vision. I mean, that was the vision of this board that hired me. I mean, they said this is what we want, and I figured it out. That was my scenario question. If you remember, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, well, all right, well we'll figure it out. But it was. That was your mission that the community was telling you, and so you as a board should be really proud of that work. So really proud.
And this area just really shows the major categories. Of course, para zero-based budgeting is a little bit different than Beth because she has all the instruction, which is gigantic, and that's what we're here in business to do. But everybody does their part. So we have the major categories, of course, instruction, everything related to instruction. Support services, which is business, office, facilities, transportation, food service, and those are in our operating funds. And then when you look at other funds, we have debt, which of course is a pay down schedule of all the crops that we've issued. We have money in the bank right now because we have a lot of crop proceeds. We still started the year with 103 million, and we spent 20, and we'll just keep spending that until it's gone. So this is just kind of a summary of our major categories. And where we're at year to date. So thinking ahead to 2021-22 with our local revenue, we talked about it's a reassessment year. We get excited on reassessment years until we get CPI, and we know we're limited to CPI, so we know that's a year that we potentially can grow bigger than a non-reassessment year. We hope for a little growth in the non-reassessment year. This year we predicted 2%, which was very conservative and in tow with what other CFOs did in other school districts. And then our non-reassessment increase is 0.3%. So 80% of your revenue coming from local, what you get from the county makes a whole difference. This one is small, but it just breaks it down in categories. We've looked at the budget in a way, kind of incrementally, giving you guys the new revenue and then the new expenditures. And our goal is always for new revenue to equal new expenditures. Unless we can be strategic and start using our fund balance for bridging finances and things like that. But this is my local tax estimates. Prop C sales tax, what that is across the state, there's a 1 cent sales tax for everybody. You buy things, the state collects that, and then they divvy it out to schools based on enrollment. State basic formula is our state money at 9%. So these are the incremental increases that we're looking at seeing next year. You look toward the bottom there, you'll see that federally related COVID. This is the slide you really part activate, but it has ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. ESSER 1 we got this year, that was at the beginning, was about $176,000, I think, dollars, which we spent a lot on PPE and everything that was upfront, those upfront costs to get kids back at school. Our next ESSER allocation is like $1,080,000. We're going to code all the salaries and those one-time positions that I talked about earlier. We haven't seen that money yet. The state hasn't even that money yet, but we're ready to apply expenditures to that when we get it. And then there's ESSER 3, which we're waiting, really, feds have talked about giving it to the state. They haven't got it there yet, and then the state will put some parameters on it and then send it to us. But I know Dr. Lake wants to talk about ESSER 3 a little bit.
Well, I just think it's important for you guys to know that those ESSER dollars is about the 10th or 11th lowest in the entire state of Missouri. There are some school districts that are getting $27 million that aren't much bigger than we are. And again, understand each community has their own unique challenges and strategy and things that they need to do. But in this pandemic, everybody needed plexiglass, no matter what needs your community had. Everybody needed extra teachers, to make class sizes the way you could do socially distance. So, there's been some talk in the House of Representatives that maybe you just do it because it's a pandemic and not like that. The Great Recession it was a different story when that relief came out. So, but it's not moving. So this money's based on our Title I.
It's our at-risk numbers.
Yeah, our at-risk
about
numbers.
14%. So, schools with a greater at-risk percentage are getting more, but yeah.
But again, as they should in certain situations, but when you're dealing with a pandemic that requires everyone to have the same things in order to open up a school, but they continue to use that model of using our at-risk population to fund that. So, but it's the 10th or 11th lowest in the state. So.
And what I have, okay, I think I have one more on there. At the very bottom, it's the line in bold, that's our reduced expenditure. So when you don't have any revenue, you have to look at other areas and you look at reducing expenditure. That's the line item we have put in the last 3 years that says, due to efficiencies, what are our estimates on reducing expenditures? The last couple of years has been 500, even though we haven't got to achieve some of those because of the pandemic, but we're looking at efficiencies of about 300,000 next year. So,
well, and I think this one, if we could have fully implemented what we wanted to do with the print shop and with transportation, this would have been our biggest year probably. It probably would have definitely tipped over $500,000. We were like at 490 something last year and like a little over 500 the first year at the end of my first year here. So we got some other things coming, but again, it's not, eventually if we want to keep going what we're doing, we're going to have to generate more revenue through a tax. So.
Our ends, which I say our new revenues, is about 2.5 million, as per my estimates today. Then you have the expenditure side, and you guys can look at this again later, but it really is just wages and benefits. The first portion is the results of successful teachers negotiation. We had a very good one this year when we finished earlier than ever, and we're on the budget even further than we've ever been earlier than ever on the details because of it, and I like that pace. I like that people know early, and I like to know that, so I'm not afraid of that, keeping that moving forward. That's the first part, is really related to employee negotiations. And then the second part is teacher ads, which I know by heart on there, but I know we have right now 3 ads at the high school because of a large 8th grade class coming in. We're looking at pushing ARC into the next school year. ARC is, COVID hasn't gone away. It's not going to be gone away in August. We have enrollment. I don't know where we're at with our enrollment numbers on that, but what we treated like our ARC program this year is, and anything that was 1 year only, around here we call it BC, what was before COVID. We're going back to square one of before COVID, and then, where would we start if we were on a regular year, and so that's why the ARC is new again. So all of those ARCs were 1 year only. Our ARC program's going to look a lot different than it did last year. So we're building it from zero base. So those are all one-time, and then we're just adding 3 more based on enrollment. Then we have orchestra and band, which is a super popular program in the district and is in need of additional staff. So we have some additional teachers, I think 9 there. And those are the 2 big components of how we spend that $2.5 million. So there we go. Revenues in and expenditures out. We're balanced at this point in time. This one is unique, and Carol will probably step in on this one a little bit, but this is related to, we're going to ask you, this is a one-time major expenditure on an adoption for a math textbook. Major to the tune of $600,000. And Tara can explain her chart that she inserted here. We knew this was coming, and we have to plan for it, but I don't want to put it in my operating expenditures. It's not a reoccurring item. I wanted to pull it out so you guys could see it separate and note that this isn't going to happen every year. And what we want to do is take some of that operating fund balance and commit it to pay for this because it's a one-time purchase. So, Sarah, I'd like to talk a little bit about it.
Absolutely. So when we look historically at how money was allocated within the teaching and learning budget, it was always a set amount of money. And then whatever happened to be within the curriculum cycle in that given year, you would either have this excess of money that you could use to do special projects, or maybe you wouldn't use the entirety of the budget, so that you knew that you always had the money available when you had one of these bigger, larger adoptions, like a math K-12 program, which really is getting to the point where we're looking at a subscription service, plus you have secondary textbooks, which have a higher level of cost than some of the adoptions we've had over the last couple of years. Counseling is not as expensive of a curriculum adoption. Family and consumer science, for example, is not as expensive. Gifted. So if you look at the very last column the very last row on this particular chart, you can see that those 4 programs together were not nearly at the same level of cost as we were talking about for a math curriculum adoption. And as Joelle referenced earlier, we've done a lot of growing of programs within the teaching and learning budget. When you look at Canvas, 3 years ago, there were no expenses for a program like Canvas. There were not programs that we have instituted in terms of subscription, ongoing instructional differentiation like we have now. Early college is another perfect example. 3 years ago, we were not sending students to St. Louis Community College to have a full immersive experience in the college atmosphere while they were also earning high school credits. So all of those programs have really dipped into what has traditionally been the teaching and learning budget. So now we're at a point where we've grown these programs and these supports and opportunities for students, but we've gotten to a large adoption, and that balance doesn't exist there within the budget for us to be able to say, okay, teaching and learning can accommodate the math curriculum, I should say the math resources, because the curriculum's already been adopted. It's the resources to teach math. So when we look at some of the areas in red, those are the ones that tend to be a higher dollar amount. So we'll need to plan for those years to be different. And that references back to what Dr. Lake said. We started our budget from 0. We started with what do we know we need to have for our students next year. And that's where it became really clear that the math adoption was going to not fit within a realm of what we've done in the past. Any questions about that?
It's really a good example of how zero-based budgeting works, though, because over the last 3 years, we've actually been zero-based, and you have been doing that. I mean, you really got deep, and she did cut some things, and not cut, but, repurpose some dollars to get this purpose down as low as she could. But by not saying, here, share, every year you have this amount of budget, and if you don't spend it, just make sure you have it in 3 years, for a math adoption, that just doesn't work with zero-based budgeting. We're asking her to, what do you need next year, and put that on it. No more, no less. And so when you get to these one-time expenditures, you need to have money in the bank, and she knows when these are going to hit to pay for those. And so this is really a fallout of zero-based budgeting. So it will look a little different when we come to you in June, just for this one-time purchase, to say, we know we have this money in the bank at the end of June. We'd like you to do a resolution knowing that there's so much money in the bank at the end of June, and we're going to spend that next year on this purpose, of one time only. Next slide.
And
go ahead.
That's why we added that last fiscal day of June meeting when we close the books. So we we'll have a better, more accurate, instead of trying to pay all the bills at the beginning of the month, we'll pay them basically all those things at the end, and we can really see where the money is and be able to move it to which account we want to.
And we don't really have to wait to the end to know our real local dollars, because if you remember the odd thing with St. Louis County, and when we use St. Louis County is in late May or early June, we get all of our protests released, all the protest taxes. In other counties, you don't get your protest taxes until they're settled, but in St. Louis County, early June, they will give you a check for everything that's protest. Last year, that was $6 million. We do end up paying some of that back when the protests are settled on the opposite way, not on the side of St. Louis County. I think last year we paid back about $550,000 of that $6 million, so we don't get to keep all of that, but we won't know how much money we really have in the bank until late May, early June, because of the cycle. So debt service, I'm just going to swing through this fast. Debt is debt. We borrow to build things and make improvements district-wide. Our current rate has been the same rate for a long time. Our goal is, to invest in ourselves as we build equity in our buildings. Go ahead, Dominic. Right now, every year we work with our bond council and our finance Piper Sanders, and we look at kind of predicting our future growth in assessed valuation, so we know when we can, again, take our equity in our home that we're never going to sell and invest in it again, so that everybody can have the best facilities. Looking at a very conservative growth of 0.5 and 2.5 in reassessment years. Looking ahead, we could do a $45 million no tax increase in 2024. And this is common. This is not, this is the best practice when you look at finance with schools. Again, it's investing in yourself, keep your facilities up to date, and not using your operating revenue for that. We want to use our operating revenue to keep our wages up to date, and we want to use our equity in our buildings when we pay off debt to reinvest in our facilities.
So, you all know we've been working with the facility planning committee to create this master facility plan for the district. So we have this document now, so when we get to these points, we can go to each individual school community or as a district as a whole and say, here are some of the projects, here's the vision for this campus, this is what we can peel off now, this is what we can do. You all are aware that we're having a complete audit done at Truman Middle School just because of the age and infrastructure of that building, what it's going to cost to bring it up to where it needs to be in the year, 24 basically, or what that looks like, just like we did with the high school. We did that cost analysis and let the community say, hey, let's get us a building that's going to last us 75, 80 years and let's move forward. Don't know if we'll be there with Truman or not when we get that reassessment back, but I mean, just things with Truman in general, we know we already have a cost, we already have a bid or a pricing on the roof. We know what HVAC is going to cost, the envelope work on the outside of it, the windows, the plumbing, the electrical, what are we going to do with that swimming pool that's been sitting empty for 25 years. So, those kinds of things that we just need to look at. And, there are elementaries that don't have their separate gymnasium, is kind of the standard, do we want a storm shelter on each of our campuses now that some have them, some don't? That equity issue of all families having that safety. So just that conversation, but that's a very conservative look at a no tax, potentially there for a future bond in 3 years. So, and again, planning 3 years out. It's not, let's 6 months from now, let's start talking about a bond, and that's just not how we've been operating the last 3 years. We want to be open and honest and transparent and make sure people are a part of that conversation. Okay.
In summary, we have to use this, but we are going to find a console and in summary, we want to talk about, our real goal around the budget is driven by our compass goals. So that's why we have these meetings together. And efficiency, even when we think we've hit all efficiencies, we never have. We're challenged by Dr. Lake and meeting once a month, twice a month with all the directors on what's the next step, what's the next thing that we can do better. Long-range planning, fiscally responsible fund balances, and then watching assessed valuation. So it's key to watch the legislative session on assessed valuation and changes that they propose on that, because anything that I think one of them out right now is capping, growth. And when you look back, when you look at 2019, when there was a 16% growth in assessed valuation, not a lot of people know that we were held harmless, and we only got to grow by a small amount. I mean, if they put a cap on that, you know, that again is putting more parameters around our major revenue source, and that stuff is scary. So I think I'm done.
Questions for Joelle? I know our new friend to the table had a one-on-one to get her up to speed. I know you guys have seen this before and have been involved with these conversations over the last few years. So, but anything new there? Anything, questions, comments?
I just think it's impressive that in 3 years we've been able to move from 18 to 20 on the salary up. And it's just due to everybody's hard work and looking at your budgets and really diving in deep. I know you guys have spent many hours brooding over documents for that, so thank you for that. Appreciate that.
And I would say too, well, thank you as a member.
Yeah, I would say as well, thank you, both, you know, as a member as well, the finance committee here at Lindbergh, our facilities committee. I mean, I've watched closely over the years how you handle the district's finances. You have always approached them very meticulously, very reasonably, very conservatively, and with the approach of the whole zero-based budgeting concept that we had talked about before, and maximizing our efficiencies along the way. And I know Dr. Lake had mentioned this before we spoke. I am very aware, as I think our colleagues are here, that much of that, almost all of it, has come from you, and I wanted to.
No, it's from everybody.
Well, I know, but
you gotta have some from the top, and then everybody jumping on board. So
we're all part of the team,
Yep.
but then we also have folks who, like yourself, with the skills, knowledge, you know, abilities, past, you know, leadership in this area as you've had to help make this happen. So it's just kind of just a thank you.
we want to keep seeing it go forward. So we're at that point where we need to look outside the box a little bit.
Yes, yeah, it's worked very well. Thank you.
And you had in top R and a pandemic, and it's been a heck of a year, so thank you for all you and Dawn, everybody. Pretty busy, right?
Right.
Done a great job, though. Okay, so now we'll shift back to 4.01, which is compass goals. I guess we'll start with Dr. Sparks.
We're not saving the best for last, right?
Right.
All right, so I'm excited to transition us away from talking about money and start talking about students and the goal and the reason that we are all here. A couple of big ideas as we start to look through this draft document of the compass is we have this document organized by, you know, what is our why, how do we do that, and what specifically are we doing in order to support our students. And if you'll remember, when you look at this document, anything in green is something that has remained at that level of work. So we have our work that is investigate, things that we're really looking into, but we're not sure that we want to commit to yet. We have our elements that we are researching, which is we're really developing what a plan of action would be like. And then we finally have our implement, which is we're actually in the process of putting whatever we have researched into play. So when you look at this document, anything that you see that is in the green font is something that is staying at the same level. So for instance, my first bullet there is restorative practices and equity student leadership team. That was also on there from the 2021 school year. Anything that you see in orange is something that has moved up from the previous level. So you can see trauma embedded practices that had previously been a research, and now we've moved that up into implement. Those things that are in black font are things that we have put into the compass. They're newly added to the compass. So just to kind of reframe what you see as you look at the compass document. I am not going to talk about, because we have a significant number of items within the teaching and learning compass. I'm not going to talk about all of these. I'm going to focus on the ones that are highlighted in the yellow. so that you're aware of some of the big things that we're really excited about. So first of all, when we look at the work that we're doing, we have our teaching and learning compass divided into 4 sections. We have one that is focused on social emotional learning, which is our first one here. We have another one that is focused on professional learning, one that is focused on a guaranteed and viable curriculum, and then our final one is focused on the systems we create to make all of these things work for our students. So when we're talking about social and emotional learning, one of the things that we're really excited to go forward with in terms of implementation next year is our digital wellness scope and sequence. So basically, we know that we have great lessons in play for our students with regard to digital wellness. However, what we want to do is increase the transfer from what happens in our schools to what happens in the home. So how do we start to clearly articulate to our families what's happening with our students' digital citizenship, how they're practicing online safety, all of those elements that would fall under this idea of digital wellness, and start to build a more collaborative partnership with our families so that the work that students are learning at school is transferring to their practices at home. This is something we know that ever increasingly in a technological world, our kids are going to have to do this well. So really focusing on that, we've got a summer workshop with some of our key leaders in the district in order to lay out that plan for implementation next year. Along those same lines, we have our Lindbergh Life work. Lindbergh Life has been a redesign coming out of character education. It's a merge of social, emotional, character education, and even to some degree our success skills. Those skills that are lifelong skills that we know students are going to need in order to be successful. So we've done some work with big projects. Dr. Lawson has led these with Unity Week, which is a focus on inclusion and anti-bullying. And then also what's new this year has been the community project, and it's this move towards a real service learning focus. We have some exciting projects that our students are in the process of doing right now. This was our first year. This spring was the first time opening that up for some of our students. And some students are choosing to do it individually. We have some students who are doing it as part of a class project, and we just anticipate that this is going to continue to grow, and we're going to be excited to share some of those completed projects with you when that time comes. And then I mentioned earlier success skills and this idea of what are the life skills that our students need to have in order to move beyond academic and to be able to function well in life and in the workplace beyond their traditional pre-K 12th grade education. We've worked with our Lindbergh Learning Team, which is comprised of teachers throughout the district, as well as our Teaching and Learning Board Advisory, to really finalize this draft of 15 skills that we expect our students to master before they leave us as high school seniors. And so we're going to be rolling out that process in this upcoming school year, getting that into more of our teachers' hands, starting to build it into our report card process, and starting to look at developing a portfolio system where our students can demonstrate how they are expressing these skills. So some really exciting elements there that, that one is one that we have highlighted in orange because it's moved up from the research stage. That's a perfect example of one that will stay and implement for a couple of years while we build the capacity of doing it well. And then moving into research, I've highlighted social emotional screening tools and portfolios for Lindbergh Life. So I just referenced the e-portfolios. That is something we're in the process of researching right now, and I don't expect that we will have that completed for full implementation next year. So we're looking at that. We are also looking at how do we drill down to student social emotional skills. Right now we have a survey tool that we use with our students called Youth Truth, and it goes into to what degree do you feel like you belong at school? What are your relationships like with your teachers and with your peers? And giving us a general idea of how students feel in school. And you saw some of that data that was referenced in our learning report earlier this month. We want to look at a tool that's going to drill down even more and give us more concrete data that we can use to influence what our climate at school looks like, and then how we potentially even support individual students. That particular tool, Youth Truth, gives us a good sense of student satisfaction, but it's an anonymous survey. So how do we use that data to help individual kids who might need more support? So there are opportunities and there are tools out there that we want to research that could be more individualized. Yes?
Yes, sir. Sounds good. I just had a question on the survey method. With whom are we sharing the data that this is done, processed? And is what's shared, is it strictly aggregate data, or is it
broken down into individual data?
So Youth Truth is it does disaggregate to some degree, but it does not drill down to individual students. It's completely anonymous. There's no record of that. Anything that we would look at that would start to be more specific to individual students and being able to support those, we would run through our educational framework process to ensure that the data privacy laws that are required through COPA are met.
Right.
That's really been, and actually we're going to talk about that at the May 11th board meeting where we talk about the technology integrations that have happened, because student privacy, I feel like, is one of those things that has come up through our technology, assessment of technology services, where there has been a huge amount of growth done within the technology department to support student privacy.
Thanks for that.
You are welcome. All right, so then moving down into professional learning, we've got some exciting things happening, continuing to happen with regard to professional learning. Something that is new going into this year, we originally planned on starting the teacher leadership cohort this year, but because of COVID, professional learning opportunities for teachers were pretty limited. And one of the components of our teacher leadership cohort is to be able to get our teachers out to have professional learning experiences outside of our school district. Our teacher leadership cohort is a process where our teachers will apply to do really essentially a deep dive with our teaching and learning team on what does teacher leadership look like at the building level. So we're really going to encourage our building leadership team members, our teacher leaders who have additional roles, maybe they are curriculum writers or they are department chairs, to apply to be a part of this initial cohort. So we'll spend time looking at things like this, the processes, how do you work with colleagues in order to build capacity as you are a teacher leader within a building and wanting to grow programs that you are a part of developing. And then, like I said, a personalized plan of study where they get the opportunity to go out and learn about something of interest that they can come back and implement within their schools or whatever program they are leading. So we are crossing our fingers that professional learning opportunities will look somewhat normal next year and that they'll have great opportunities to actually have some high quality professional learning outside of what they do with us. That would be a key part of it, but this would be an additional component. And then we're continuing our project-based learning cohorts. So if you remember, when we started working on high school redesign, one of the primary parts of our conversation was, what does teaching and learning look like? What is the student experience like in this redesigned high school? And the reality is we want it really authentic. We want it really engaging. We want it deep. We want it relevant to our students. So in that process, we also started partnering with New Tech Network to provide these cohorts. It's multiple days that teachers really look and analyze the process for having a more inquiry-based learning opportunity for students. So we have teachers who've been going through those cohorts for the last few years. They get refresher sessions each year in order to keep that trajectory going, and then we're continuing to get more and more teachers going through those cohorts. We are focusing primarily on secondary right now. Elementary has done some of this because the principals have gotten excited and they see the value. But we were very purposeful in wanting to make sure that when we cut the ribbon on the new Lindbergh High School, that programs could really follow the vision that we had. And then with middle school redesign, that's naturally becoming part of that conversation as well. So we've got that mix of middle school and high school teachers who are participating in that. Technology staff professional learning, this has been a key focus of ours, and I referenced our assessment of technology services earlier. One of the things that came through from that assessment was that we were doing a great job of integrating some new technology, but our technology staff weren't really getting the professional learning that they needed in order to help support or even understand the why of some of that programming. So that's been an ongoing part of the work we've been doing as we continue to support their knowledge base as well. And then this next one I'm really excited about. You guys are going to get kind of a sneak peek to something that we are going to share with our building leadership teams in June. We've been working within our teaching and learning department on a professional learning vision. One of the things we've been hearing from teachers quite a bit, which is completely understandable, is that they feel like there's so much professional learning. There's so much that's coming at them, whether it's specific to their content area or it's specific to use of technology. I mean, let's not even talk about what COVID has done with regard to professional learning. So our goal with this vision is really to identify and help our staff see that these things don't happen in isolation. Professional learning isn't a silo of, okay, we're going to talk about math right now, or we're going to talk about We're going to talk about social emotional learning. This all integrates together with the student experience in the classroom. So we have created, this is a visual that I'll kind of walk you through, that highlights, essentially, content area is always going to be a component of this. No matter what you teach, your content area, whether it's math, science, computer science, family and consumer science, that's always going to be a baseline for the work that you're doing with regard to professional learning. But we have three other big pieces of professional learning, kind of buckets, that all of the work that we have fit into. This idea of whole child. When we're talking about whole child, we're talking about social emotional learning, inclusivity, trauma-informed practices. And you can see, as Dominic shared over on the side here, kind of what those emblems are that represent that work. We have blended learning. We've obviously heard a lot about Canvas this year as we've integrated iPads and Chromebooks, and then looking at the instructional design around blended learning, that all falls in that second area. And then as Dominic scrolls over to the other side, huge focus on standards-based instruction. How do we really identify those priority skills that we want students to have, allow them to have a personalized experience where they're working at their own pace in order to achieve those goals, and that we're giving them really good feedback and good instructional opportunities to experience those learning targets and those types of instruction. So when you look at those three circles, they essentially all overlap. And so in the professional learning process, like, where does that come together? It comes together in our teachers' professional learning communities. So when we are providing professional learning, let's say this summer we're doing some work in math, because as we just said earlier tonight, we have new math resources. We are gonna, when we're working with our teachers, we're going to work with them, not just on the new math resources, but how do you integrate these resources with Canvas? And so that then goes into the blended learning component. And then we're gonna also work with our teachers on how do you differentiate for students who are at varying levels with math? What about those students who are gonna accelerate and they need something that's deeper learning? So we're gonna focus and pull that into the professional learning process. So the goal with this vision is to be able to clearly articulate with our teachers every time we're doing professional learning how these things intersect with one another, that they're not isolated silos, for lack of a better word, and that ultimately it's all building towards the same type of high quality experience we want for our students. So it really identifies all of those key things that we're doing with regard to professional learning, but it's no longer about you do this and then you do this and it's all separate. This is pulling it all together.
Let me jump in here for a second. So now I'm going to click on the slide 2 over there on the left. So if we put that slide up there, that would overwhelm it. Okay? So, but each professional learning session has a topic, right? And so we want them to have that visual to see how that work overlays. But that's our work right there. I mean, that's the initiatives, those are the conversations, those are the professional learning things that we need to do with our staff. And so having that visual, and Tara and her team, and this is awesome. We shared this with Ed Plus today, and Paul Ziegler was like, yeah, send us that. So because, you know, they do a lot of professional learning as well, and I think it's really, that's what misses a lot. Teachers always go, oh, one more thing, right? So hopefully this visual, we'll see how it all kind of just comes together. So it's awesome.
Yeah, we are very excited about using this to really be a better communication tool with our teachers to understand the work we're doing and the why behind it. All right, and then moving on to, so that kind of covers what I wanted to highlight with regard to professional learning. As I shared earlier when I talked about standards-based instruction, our goal with a guaranteed and viable curriculum is that our students can get a high-quality experience no matter who their teacher is and which building they attend. So it's this idea that we have to have assessment practices in place that are universal, high-quality instructional practices that are in place, and that we're all moving in the same direction. Because ultimately, all of our kids end up at the same place, Lindbergh High School, and we want them to be successful there. So you know we've spoken a lot about NWEA Math Growth. This is continuing to be an implement. This year we implemented it for the first time in grades 4 through 8, but there's still a lot of work to do to make that data valuable in terms of how does it transfer to the student experience in the classroom. So how are we using that data within our PLCs to support our students and ensuring that they're getting the instruction that they need. So that's our next layer of continuing to use that data. And that's not just NWEA math, that's also our FastBridge data in K through 3rd grade. So being able to really focus in and hone in on that, on the data tools that we have and how we use them for instruction. Elementary computer science. We put this on hold this year. Computer science standards are new from the state. And with COVID, this was one of those areas where we said, we cannot add this in right now. This is not going to work. So as we're going into next year, we are going to refocus on the priority around our computer science standards. Now let me say, first of all, the vast majority of computer science standards already overlap with work that's happening in our library media programming, as well as our math programming, and I'm sure there are other areas in our science as well. So what we're looking at are really those areas that are more coding specific and how we start to implement those. We've got library media is picking up some of that, but then, as I referenced a little bit later in this presentation, we've been looking at specials and block courses at the elementary level for the last couple of years. And if you remember, with Dressel and Concord having 5 sections of specials classes, they need something beyond art, music, and PE. A couple of years ago, we started an investigation on what could that 5th block be for those particular schools. Dressel started with a program called Design Lab. That has had a lot of positivity. Students respond really well to it. It goes deep into to a lot of the work around these computer science standards. And then Concord started with a class called Calm. It was much more about self-regulation, personal, social, emotional wellness, etc. What we have found is that the Design Lab really has the legs to be able to be that additional block in our elementary schools. But at this time, Dressel is our only school that needs 5 block sections. So as we are naturally looking at adding an additional teacher at Kennerly because of the art program being attached to Kennerly, this is a time for us to start investigating, instead of having 2 PE, 1 art and 1 music, should our 4-block rotation be Design Lab, art, music, and PE. So we're starting to dig into that being our baseline at all of the elementary schools, and then for a school like Dressel, where there is a 5th section, that's where we have the additional PE. So that's a change that we're going to use as we go into this next year. Middle school redesign, as I've referenced earlier, a lot of work's been going on with middle school redesign. And as you know, that work is not finished yet. COVID has slowed down our processes significantly. I know our middle school principals are deep into the master schedule building process. We've got some new courses that are being recommended for students to be able to experience in terms of electives. So some really exciting choices that our kids are going to be able to really personalize their experience at the middle school. We've got a schedule that will look very similar to the high school schedule, where there is 2 days of the week where students are blocking. So the deeper, richer learning experiences will have a structure where they can actually happen in the middle school. And then finally on implement, we are in the process of applying for our Family and Consumer Science class to become a career and technical education program. Currently, we have biomedical at the high school as a CTE program. We have business, we have marketing, and we have engineering. And we've been evaluating family and consumer science for the last couple of years about the possibility of growing that program from less of a personal experience program to more of a career-based program. So this is really exciting as we start to give students additional practical arts options that can further their future careers. And then in research, as we continue to implement new programming, things like project-based learning, things like computer science standards, and we balance those with things that we know are foundational learning skills. Think of all the work that's happened with regard to literacy in the last couple of years. How do we help? We need to research and be able to communicate to teachers. Like, how do you merge these things together and do that well so you feel like they're not competing with one another and they're falling under the same umbrella of, I'm using these skills in order to have these relevant, authentic activities. So really trying to delve into the practices that are in place and provide more structures for teachers so they don't feel like they're having their classroom is kind of pulled in multiple directions. Aviation program at the high school is in its research stage. We are fully expecting that we'll be bringing that course to you in November when we bring the Navigator for the 22-23 school year. So that's really exciting. A lot of excitement from the teachers with regard to what this can be. And I know partnership with Beth's department with regard to to using drones specifically in order to build some skills for kids. In fact, there was an article that Dr. Lake just sent me today, another one about drone careers for the future. And so again, that idea of how do we continue to build programs for students that are going to give them a strong sense of opportunity for the future.
Well, if you remember, drone aviation was in the top 25 future jobs from the listening and learning, and we put those and that slide this year on there. So it's, and again, back to that idea of Diploma Plus, this is another example of the facts exploration as well. So we want our kids to walk out with more than just a high school diploma. What is it that they can have? College credit hours, service hours, all those credentials, industry recognized credentials. So this is good work. So you have about 2 minutes left because you're taking your colleagues' time.
Okay, I'm going to be right. I talked about block and specials courses already. World language opportunities. This one is new, and it really came out. It's been kind of floating out there as part of the specials and block investigation. Could we do something more with languages in elementary school? And then it really bubbled up to the surface again in middle school redesign, where we were struggling to really figure out how to do middle school language as well and give kids more differentiated opportunities. So we want to come back to that conversation really and research how we can look at K-12 world language opportunities for our students and potentially give students more opportunities younger if that's a passion that they have and an interest that they have. So we're going to start researching that as we go into next year. Couple of investigates, micro school structure. This really comes back to this idea around the career opportunities for students. There are great models that we unfortunately have not been able to visit this year, where there are schools that have micro schools within a larger school for students who are studying something like aviation, for example, or I'm studying health careers. How do we kind of encapsulate a full program for those students where even their general education courses could potentially lead towards all of that content? So another way to just kind of support students' interests. And then high school winter session is a conversation we're having as part of the calendar committee. I'm going to hold on that one because I'm sure I'll be giving you some updates soon. And then lastly, just two more things. Well, a few more things. Esports opportunities. Esports, so we've had this in our research for a couple of years, and we are getting it off the ground for next year. So some really exciting things. We know we have about 100 students who are interested in participating in an esport league. So now we're in the process of figuring out which league. Who's sponsoring it, working with Jason Knittig and our Lindbergh Community and Recreation program. Thank you, community programs, in order to get that going for next year. A lot of student interest, a lot of student excitement around that. And then looking at acceleration guides is another thing that we've been working on with Tracy Bednarik, our gifted coordinator, to really have a process in place for evaluating when students are ready to accelerate. And that goes back again to how do we personalize that experience for students? If they are showing us that they are ready to move forward and what comes next, what's the data we're collecting and how do we make a plan of action for students? And more importantly, how do we communicate that to families so they know exactly what that process looks like and it's not kind of behind the curtain of what we do within Lindbergh. And then a lot of work that's happening right now around early childhood special education. That's been an ongoing research for us that we're continuing into next year as we look at how to build those structures. You know about school start times. I've kind of got that there right now, but we'll know if that needs to move to implement within the next month or so. And then finally, working once again with Lindbergh community programs to look at providing a district tutoring service that can be clearly available for families. So, I went over my time. Any questions?
Back there, the gentleman sitting back there running the YouTube channel right now, Tony, he's our drone guy. So all the pictures you see right now, we knew we were going to start this program, and so we went ahead and purchased one for our communications department, that drone. We're, like Tara was talking about, we have, just because you're not a certified teacher, you have a passion, so Tony can partner and go in and work with kids and do stuff like that with the communications department. And Beth, I think, has something to talk about as well with an intern and things like that with her compass goals, or she may not be highlighting that one tonight, I don't know. So, there we go. Questions for Tara? Lots of stuff, lots of work, lots of good stuff, and we didn't talk about it at the beginning, but all of this work goes back to those 5 success measures. Even if you go back to Joelle's budget conversation, the number one success measure is having high quality teachers in the classroom, so that work around compensation as well, and all the professional learning as well, the personalized learning, the social emotional learning, the development of the 4 C's, all of those things. And then that last one that we don't talk about, I don't think enough, that we need to probably, is number 5, student satisfaction. We want our kids to be happy, right? And every one of us wants happy kids. So what are we doing inside our schools to generate this happy kid walking out the door? So anyways, Sarah's work's awesome, and then these other folks are supporting those 5 success measures as well. So who's going to go? Who's next? Brian.
Sarah and I talked about our presentations, and we were walking up the hall, and she said, I think I'm going to go about 10 minutes. She goes, I'm really not going to have a lot tonight, and I was looking for someone to help me with betting on that. I won't run there. I couldn't find anyone to take a bait. So that's the most important work, obviously, that we do, teaching and learning. So awesome stuff. Our goals in human resources are largely built around what Dr. Lake alluded to, high quality teachers and exemplary workforce, and what can we do to help with that? When you survey any staff in any industry, number 1 always comes up compensation. Clearly you heard tonight that goal is being met. Joel and Dr. Lake and the teachers organization has done a great job with that. The other things though that you look at, you get into some softer things, and that's what we've tried to focus on in our Compass goals. So our 3 goals are around retention of our great teachers. You heard about the exodus that we experienced in years past. So retention is, we've organized that as number 1. Recruitment always will be important. And then our 3rd goal is service to our staff. A great affirmation to the work that's happening in all of the districts, but on these as well, is yesterday we were notified that Lindbergh Schools has once again, for the 2nd year in a row, been named the St. Louis Post-Dispatch top workplace. In a year where there's a pandemic, that's pretty amazing. We had over 80% of our people participate in a completely external survey. It's done by a 3rd party, and over 1,000 comments. And in a year where we are having, it's tough to work anywhere, for 80% of our people to come back anonymously and independently and verify that this is a great place to work. It's pretty cool. So that was a nice note to get yesterday. Good way to start your day on a Monday with an email like that. So, and that's really all I have tonight. So I appreciate your time. Hate to start there and go, but no, it's that part of the year has been very good. There's nothing in this presentation about COVID-19, so that will probably surprise you as well. We've talked a lot about handbooks over the course of the year. This is going to be very tactical and not near as exciting as teaching and learning, but these are things that have to be done. Lindbergh Schools has too many handbooks. We have 9 employee handbooks, and they all have different leave policies and different employee benefit pieces. And it's not that any one group's being treated terribly and others are being treated very well, but it's just inconsistent enough that it's difficult to manage. It probably is to some degree unfair in some instances. So we've started in the last 2 years really auditing those handbooks. And this is really more focused on not so much teachers, because the teachers have a very unusual job in that they are here when they're here, but then some of them are not. This is more focused on equity in those 12-month support staff people that don't have summers off and don't have those types of leave. So we're working on leave specifically, and I will say in 2020, spring 2020, we finished up with the Lindbergh Association of Office Professionals. We got that handbook really tidy and in a good place, and we're just about to wrap up and bring it to the board in May, the nurses handbook. So those are 2 that are in really good shape. Teachers handbook is in really good shape. So we'll continue to go down the list, and where we can reduce and combine, there are 2 areas in the ECE organization I'll talk about in a little bit, where we're going to eliminate a couple of these handbooks. So where we can combine those and put people all together in one group and just treat people great but equally, we will do that. So handbooks are a big piece. Another item that we've highlighted here is the Lindbergh Aspiring Principals Academy. Tara mentioned the teacher leadership cohort. That is a prerequisite. So once the cohort is up and running, we'll work with Tara to kind of watch that and see the things that they do, and then we're going to offer to those people who successfully complete that course the Aspiring Principals Academy. We want to grow our own here because we have highly talented leaders, and we also want to offer people as part of that retention room to grow in their career and be promoted. And so this is a great avenue for that. Some of our research and our ongoing pieces, we are studying our employee insurance plans. As you know, later this evening, you'll be consent agenda, but we've done some talking with you through packets and things. We'll be presenting a new insurance broker for the board's consideration. And this year is going to be quite a bit of time researching and working on transitioning within and making sure what we have in place is the absolute best that we can do for our employees. Also, I would like to point out that an ongoing piece that I think deserves to be highlighted, especially this year, is our wellness program continues to expand. Almost every week there is an offer to participate in class paths or online yoga. We've got buildings doing competitions together about water intake. And so this wellness thing that was really just a theory 5 years ago has become a very real thing, and was a very, very large part in our discussions with our brokers. Yeah.
So, just a little more in depth in the wellness program. Is that offered beyond? I mean, it's offered to the Lindbergh community. Is it strictly employees, or is that something that also embraces others?
This is I'm referring to here is a staff benefit. It's part of our health. It's part of our health benefits program,
right.
And it's offered to staff. However, I'm sure that there are these online yoga classes and things like that. I'm sure there are families that are also joining in on that, spouses, kids, that kind of thing. But it's focused largely on our employees. Yes, sir.
Okay.
On the recruitment side, we are part of Human Resources. We are part of the larger district diversity and equity committee, and there is a subcommittee that I chair that just looks at really all things HR processes and hiring. And one thing that we found to be very, very good for us is when we look at our processes, just to run those by that subcommittee and say, what do you all have? And that's been very insightful. So our plan is to continue that with that group. Video screening tool. This is a kind of a neat story about how the pandemic accelerated some things. We had this way down on our investigate list. We have, fortunately, in Lindbergh, oftentimes many employees, many candidates who apply for our jobs, and that's great. It's difficult to see face to face so many candidates, particularly if they're coming to us nationally from far away. And so we talked about video screening tools, and at the time when we first started to look into this, it was quite expensive to add these. And then pandemic and Zoom, and last year we did video screening. It was really our first year to try it. It went very well. We expanded it this year, and even post-pandemic, we plan to continue using Zoom or a similar product that is inexpensive, easy to use, and enables us to really connect with people on a deeper level than just a paper screening or something that they video and send to us. It's that you can actually interact. So this is one that on the research part that's going to be there for this year. Recruitment fairs this year really took it on the chin with regard to the pandemic. As you might imagine, there were some virtual things, but that's kind of difficult to do. We did have 2 districts that reached out last year and talked to us about a partner recruitment fair for diversity fair, minority candidate fair, and we plan to again begin those discussions and have one locally here. You get into the top workplaces award on there. I'm glad that I was able to report that tonight. Keep everything down. And then early childhood education program. Tara talked about the SSD part. The things that are in green that aren't highlighted, we have largely completed, but we're leaving those up here because it's a bigger picture project than that. For instance, we reassigned a Flyers Club program from early childhood, since it doesn't serve early childhood students, it serves school age students. We moved that to Community Programs Department. Jason Kennedy will be leading that. He has full-time leads that really after the before school care and after school care, that time in between, they don't have an assignment really, since they're not part of ECE anymore. And so we are going to, for 1 year, try it out impact study. We're going to move those people during the school day into the nurse's office to provide every elementary school a health food assistant. This is something nurses have been asking for quite a while, and this is a way that through efficiency that this can be done. And Charlene's able to live without the services that he's provided in her building as we move this around. So it'll be interesting to see how this works. Hopefully it'll be just as good in real life as it was on paper. The broker RFP, we talked about that. I will spend more time on that. Our research pieces, workman's compensation procedures. We don't have a lot of workman's compensation claims in Lindbergh. However, Ann Worth and I have talked a little bit about some possibilities to find some efficiencies. And part of that would be possibly having our own, or we're not one of the larger districts, so maybe partnering with some other districts to have an on-site help center and have to be able to make our workman's compensation, among many other pieces, very efficient. I think if we go down, that is all for me. Happy to answer any questions. If not, I'll yield the remainder of my time to Joel Cracchiolo.
You were 3 minutes over.
Really? Wow. Well, that's top of the place. Yeah.
No, you were 2 minutes under.
All right.
I had my time, that's needs for time, so I'm gonna go through this. We've heard all the story about the colors and our categories, but in the area of business finance, our top goal, of course, is maximizing resources. Then we also have the goal of increasing transparency and customer service. Those are all our categories that we look at in business and finance. One of the items that have moved up to implement this year, and I think it's perfect timing with gas, the prices that we're seeing go up is, we're looking at gas cards. Our fleet for maintenance is the team that really has a personal vehicle. We are looking into some security options, but it just makes sense to get gas cards that have a rebate or have a lower price at the gas stations, not just pay at the pump and the price you get at the pump. Also looking into what would look like to lease vehicles instead of purchase them. We've learned a lot from our copier switchover, from keeping the same equipment for 30 years and putting parts on it to make it run and then being behind on technology. So the same thing is really true in our fleet for vehicles. We keep the same trucks for 30 years and they're not really fuel efficient, and we pay a lot of money, $5,000 to $6,000 to keep them running when there's a better way to do that, more efficient, and keep the best vehicles for our crew. So that one is moved up and hopefully we can implement it soon. On transportation, I will echo Brian's statements about COVID and the pandemic pushing some things forward. Things that have worked well that we've used in the process that we've moved up, we're doing this year, but we'd like to keep them, pandemic or not, is the sign up to ride. At enrollment time, we know who's going to ride the buses, and we're not just setting up a bus assuming everybody's going to ride. That would just be 1,000 times more efficient. This isn't a place we wanted to go, but we got accelerated there because of the pandemic. Feeding charts, we want to keep that going. That's an efficient way to keep the buses. And then another one is limiting ridership to students assigned to each school bus. I know in the past we've got those calls, board members get those calls, this bus is overcrowded. Well, if you don't know how many kids are going to ride home with a friend today, you know, how do you really maintain a bus that is the right counts and efficient. So we're gonna ahead of the game on some of those because of what's happened with COVID. When we get back to normal, which is going to be very, very soon, we want to dive into activity trips and the shuttle processes, and we think there's some efficiencies there. In the area of food service, we talked a lot about staffing and keeping employees and competitive wages. I mean, we work with a contractor on our food service, but they are our team. Most of our food service workers are community people, and they work here because their kids go to school here, and this is what they want to do. So our partnership with them is important, and it's hard to keep those people. Temp services cut a lot more, so we're making sure we stay up current with the rates in our food service area as well. Arrow down. A lot of my implements cross over with other departments. Sarah, I have the more, I guess, big picture. I'm the person that, you know, gets things implemented, but we've been working on a catalog of furniture. We already have some preferred vendors that we got last year. Now we would like to have our buildings just have a catalog that they, you know, they do a lot of work to figure out what they want in their classrooms. If we can guide them and really have one resource they go to, that would be great. We want to have a replacement schedule for furniture in our buildings. Right now it's kind of like, what do you have to have this year? Put it on a list and we'll see what we can afford. So we really want to push that forward. We've been doing an impact study on using vans that are traditional school buses. We'd like to expand that. That's been working out well. Our copier stuff's going good. Our goal this year is, though, to make sure that where those copiers are located is equal access to all of our staff. We're going to, from the data that we've collected our first year really diving into copiers, we're going to make sure that we relocate the machines, that everybody has a convenient place to make copies. We're going to move some of the bigger machines out of the offices. That's not where teachers need to make copies. They need them out in the building. And we plan to do that really every year. So every year we'll look at where those are located. A little bit. We talk about our enterprise program, maximizing resources. We just want to make sure, like Dr. Lake said, that those programs are covering their costs. Also, you know, making enough profit to reinvest in that program. That's super important. Go up a little bit. Look for my next yellow. Transportation, this is, I want to make this mention that really, did I get to the complete yet? Have we got that one? Yeah, go up a little bit, or down a little bit, and I'm going to go the other way, like. It's up or down. I think we're really kind of on the complete here, and I think this is an area to look for. But the complete section is a reflection of all the efficiencies we've put in place, and the complete section on really everybody's document is starting to get the same size as, you know, the research, investigate, and implement. So these are all things that have been already done, and where some of that 1.3 million has come from that we've been able to invest in our personnel. All right, Dominic, a little bit more. One area that I want to hit on here is just, I know this question has come up to me with the boundaries that we set for transportation, which has been a major efficiency. We have 0.5 walking boundary, safe walking boundary. And Terrell, you know, worked with me on what is safe and not safe. But half a mile for elementary and a mile for secondary. That some people think that was just because of COVID, and really that was a plan prior to COVID. I mean, we're going to go there, and then, you know, so that will continue. And I just wanted to make that statement. That's worked really well. Brian and I have really worked together on, you know, staff roles and reorganization to community ed and making that more of a community programs. It's a lot of enterprise programs under that, and Jason does a great job with that. I did want to make this on food service. So when we talk about food service, I know one of the big things that we looked at when we hired a new food service vendor was our commodities. And the number of commodities we had stored off-site, and we were paying for a truck to go back and forth, and we were paying for a large storage site. In our first year, our partner in food service got our commodities off-site down to 0, and we have ample space because they are on-site with our freezers, because they're using the commodities every day in every menu item. It's really amazing what they've done on that. So, and we have strategically abandoned some items that we looked at and we did, said, hey, we're not going to go any further with that because we have a plan to do it. And now I'm going to hand it over to Beth so she can have her time. Thanks.
Any questions for Joelle? Okay, Beth, they left you 9 minutes.
I think this is the first time she's actually had the.
I know. You would have if I didn't speed tear up.
This is probably the most time I've ever had to present my complexities to you, so thank you. Well, the communications department, our work is really supporting all the work you've already heard about. So everything that we've gone through with teaching and learning or finance, human resources, this team, my team knows about it. We're helping them communicate it. We ask a lot of questions to understand. So if we can understand, we communicate out. The professional learning graphic that you saw that Mackenzie designed, that went from a whiteboard scribble with lots of ideas, that, like all the colorful circles, and into a design that really makes sense and helps explain our work. And so that's a great example of how we do what we do. You can see that on our website, in the organization with our work section, where we're able to showcase all the things that are happening. And so that's really our goal on a day-to-day basis, is to take everything that's happening in all of these departments and in our schools and with our teachers and our buildings, and make sure everything has to be communicated to someone, whether it's our staff, our families, our students, our community. So that's really our goal. And so we're going to highlight a couple of things that we are working on in the coming year. And one of that would be part of building a strong identity is we've wanted to do this for a long time. We're going to trademark our Lindbergh Schools and Lindbergh Flyers brands. And we have met with Tooth Keeney already this spring to research that process. We have a timeline. We've built it into our budget. And that's really going to give us protection over the Arch and Plain logo behind you, but also the Lindbergh Schools with the railway font that we've branded a lot of our materials with. And it won't keep our community organizations and our parent organizations from using the logos. I just had a school reach out today to get a copy of the logo for t-shirts, and that's how we want it to be used. But it will protect how it's used, and it will also keep outside organizations from using our logo and our brand for profit. That's what we don't want to happen. So this really gives us that protection for the Lindbergh Schools brand. We've done a lot of work to create style guidelines and brand standards for the Lindbergh Schools logo and brand, and we really want to be sure that we protect that. The next thing that you'll see is our Lindbergh Schools Foundation website redesign. So if you'll remember 2 years ago when we were talking to you about our goals, we redesigned the Lindbergh Schools District website. We not only reorganized it, but went to a mobile responsive platform, an accessible platform. That's another priority for our department, is just making sure our content is accessible to all of our audiences. And then, again, aligning with those brand standards and consistency. So what we're doing is we're bringing the foundation, which is under our department, we're bringing their website onto our same Blackboard platform that we use for the district, and we're splitting the cost with them on that in our budget to add their page. That will give them the same consistent look and feel. It will give them a mobile responsive website, so hopefully we can reach more people with that, with their programs that ultimately help us and our teachers and kids. So we're excited about that, and we're looking forward to that upgrade for the Foundation's website. And then on our research, this is again just building on what I've just talked about with our Lindbergh Schools. We've really built that strong style guide and brand standards for our Lindbergh Schools logos, but we want to extend that to our Lindbergh High School athletics program. That's been a goal of ours for quite some time. So we want to research that this year so that we can support our high school athletics. We've redesigned the website. We've launched a mobile app for them, branded their social media. But really we want to look at creating a consistent logo across the board for all of our teams and having those color standards as well. This is a process we want to first, that's why it's in research, look at how other schools have approached this, but then bring in our student athletes, our coaches, and our community to be a part of that process and to give input so that hopefully we can implement that the following year. So that's on our research this year to really roll that out well and have a lot of community input. And if we go down to our next goal, which is effective communication. So we began last summer, and it's just got delayed a bit, but we're refreshing our crisis communication plan to really make sure that we've shored that up and it's where we need to be. So in the event of an emergency, everybody knows their roles and we're ready to communicate. That's something that we want to make sure and implement this year and refresh. And we've got some good examples to guide that for us. And we're working with Terrell, Baker, and security. And then this is something I'm really excited about. We are going to put a small committee together this summer of anyone who oversees a program that happens in the summer. So whether that's our community ed and rec, ECE, our summer school, our high school athletic and activities that sponsor camps, we're going to bring all those people together and come up with a plan so that we can communicate summer offerings with our families and our community early and in one place. That's something we've needed. We've heard our parent feedback on that, and we want to do it well. We don't want people to have to look around and find our summer offerings, so we know that's a place we can improve, and we're looking forward to doing that.
And that came out of parent leadership. I think some of you were on that meeting
Yes.
here recently. So again, that's a great idea. And I think we landed on into February, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, everything will go out.
March 1st, but
Yeah, March 1st, yeah. So into February. So March 1st, it'll go out to one place. Families can plan their start planning their summer. So.
Let's see. So ongoing, of course, like I talked about earlier, we work with our central office departments to proactively develop those plans for their communication initiatives to help people understand what's happening in the compass. I mean, even taking notes tonight of what are the things we need to be mindful that we're highlighting. And if you scroll down a little bit further, that ties into a new goal that we've added under, just a little, engaging our community in support of our programs and initiatives. That what is not new, but the goal underneath is as far as building connections between our classroom and our community. My team, Tony, Mackenzie, and I, we've talked about how do we know we do a really good job of promoting the big events and the special events and the things that are happening in our schools that are a big deal. How do we do a better job of showing people just what the learning experience looks like day in and day out, the everyday classroom experiences, the learning that's happening, all the things that we're hearing about here in our board meetings. And so we are going to strategically plan how we can be in all of our buildings on a very regular basis on just sort of a low-key participating in the classroom experience, being there, recording it, video and photos, but also just experiencing it so that we can share that on social media and we can just be a more regular presence on our platforms about what our kids are doing each day. And we know our teachers and our principals do that. We just want to elevate that to the district level, and it will help our understanding too. And then my second to last one, this is also really exciting. Our Lindbergh Schools Foundation has created a junior board. So they did interviews this spring under Erica's leadership, and they've selected 21 students who will be in grades 9 through 12 next school year. And the junior board is going to give these kids a real authentic experience with serving on the board, learning about community service and giving back to the district. They're going to work with our adult board members on the Lindbergh Schools Foundation to provide input and give their thoughts on various events and fundraising. And they'll meet monthly during Power Lunch with Erica and her board members, a couple of her board members who are taking this on. So we're really excited about that. That's something that she's had on her goals to implement for a couple of years now. So that will be really exciting. And like Dr. Lake mentioned, we're also really looking forward to having an intern for our foundation and an intern for our communications department from the high school next year as part of the high school internship program. So my last one on here is just how can we continue to effectively engage senior citizens and community members who aren't directly connected to the district. I put this one on, I highlighted it just because we put our senior associates program on pause during this past year. And as we look at re-engaging our senior citizens in that community, we really want to look at how we can do that as effectively as possible. Some of that might look the same, some may look a little bit different than how we're currently doing it. So, any questions for me? Thank you.
So that is the proposed 21-22 Compass Plan, our goals, our work. Again, just to remind everybody in the community that's watching. So for the next 2 weeks, you guys have this document. You had it longer than that, but you've gotten to hear some explanation around and some context around the work. So you got 2 weeks. What did we miss? Where's something that, hey, I didn't really hear this. I'd like to hear this. You know, maybe I just, you know, can you show me where that is in the document, or maybe we missed something? So just take this time. Any cabinet member that you know, of their area, they're the experts of that. So feel free to reach out to them for clarification, suggestions, all of that, and then we will present this to you. It'll be for the record. It doesn't. We don't have this be a board approved item. We like that flexibility. Like we want to change goals, keep you in the loop what's going on. So it's just, we'll present it for the record. We can have some discussion around it before we kind of finalize it and do all of that. But you have a couple weeks here to provide some feedback to us, and before we say here it is. Okay, we good? You good?
Good.
Good. All right. Thanks.
Thank you all for presenting and everything you do. I mean, it's a lot of work that goes into running a high quality district of this size, so I appreciate it by everybody that's here. So we'll also move to 9.0. We do have 2 action items by consent. Do I have a motion to approve action items 9.01 and 9.02 as presented? So moved. Motion by Matt, second.
Second.
Second by Jennifer. Does anyone wish to remove an item from the consent agenda for individual consideration before we go?
I just have a question.
What?
Regarding the Apple lease purchase, didn't we make a payment last summer as well?
More than one.
Okay.
We have 2 leases out there right now for Apple. We have 2 current leases out there for Apple, and that's another area where instead of just buying the equipment and staying with it forever, we've worked toward 7 leases. So Dominic has added a 3rd lease this year that is working into his current budget. So we'll have 3 leases from Apple.
Okay, thanks. I just saw it said the first payment, and I was sort of coming at.
Yeah, that's right. It's the first payment on a new lease.
All right.
Yes. Good catch.
Yeah. And again, what in theory, and Dominic, I mean, he's here actually, but I mean, we're actually, I mean, we get some value at the end of that lease back to us as well. So it's, you know, it's like Joel said, we know we're always going to need devices, right? So why not have build in your budget, your monthly payment to have the newest, latest version instead of like, oh my goodness, these are 6-year-old iPads or Chromebooks and they're not working the way we want. Now we have this large cost, so we just build that into our budget. And Dominic's done an amazing job of doing his existing budget that was already there, maybe a little bit of extra dollars, but he has killed this. I mean, where we were 3 years ago with technology in the school district to where we are today and how we went about that process has been truly remarkable, and that's Dominic and Tara's leadership has been really, really good. So, good question.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the lease agreement or the consulting services? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 6-0. We have no need to call for a recess. We already held our executive session, so we'll move to 15.0, which is adjournment. I have a motion to adjourn board workshop number 1531.
So
moved by Christie, second by Jennifer. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Board workshop is adjourned. Thank you.